Welcome to the Space Telescope Public Lecture Series. Tonight's talk, The Universe of Dante Alighieri, from the descendant of Dante Alighieri, Sperello di Serego Alighieri. I am your host, Dr. Frank Summers from the Office of Public Outreach at the Space Telescope Science Institute. And as always, I want to thank our wonderful tech team, Thomas Marufu and Grant Justice. I will also note that management has decided that the Space Telescope Public Lecture Series will continue to be online only through the rest of 2022 and also during 2023. So for the foreseeable future, we will continue to be online only, and we will not have the in-person presentations in the STSCI auditorium. Our upcoming talks next month on November 1st, Stephanie Lamassa from Space Telescope will talk about black holes. How do we see that which gives off no light? On December 6th, we will do high energy astronomy with the Swift Observatory, and that will feature Steve Kirby from the Penn State University. On January 10th, we will have a talk, but I have not scheduled it. So as usual, I put in my placeholder, a fascinating topic by an insightful speaker. When we do have that talk booked, it will appear on our website, www.stsci.edu/public-lectures. On that webpage, you will find a link to our webcasts, both our YouTube playlist and our STSCI webcast archives, as well as the email list where you can put in your email address and hit the subscribe button. Also on our website, we have the list of the upcoming lectures. And if you click on one of those lectures, you will get the details, the description and the speaker, as well as, after it's been recorded, links to the STSCI webcast and the YouTube webcast. For announcements, as I said, sign up at the website. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Hubble Space Telescope. That's all one word, Hubble Space Telescope. You will get new video notices and reminders of live events such as this. Finally, if you have comments or questions, you can send them to the email address publiclecture, all one word, @stsci.edu. Furthermore, you can follow us on social media. We have social media channels for the Hubble Space Telescope, for the Webb Space Telescope, and for the Space Telescope Science Institute. And you can find those on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and Instagram. I myself do a very minor amount of stuff on social media on Facebook and Twitter as Dr. Frank Summers. And now our news from the universe for October 2022. Our story tonight, a tarantula caught by Webb. This is the Large Magellanic Cloud, and it is a dwarf galaxy that is a satellite galaxy of our own Milky Way galaxy. And you may say, oh, all right, it's a dwarf galaxy, it's kind of small and everything, but it has the largest star-forming region anywhere in the local group. This star-forming region, called the Tarantula Nebula, is larger than any star-forming region in the Milky Way galaxy or in the Andromeda galaxy. There is an incredible amount of star formation going on here. And of course, astronomers have studied it many, 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 many times. We have studied it with the Hubble Space Telescope. And here is an image from, I think this is 2012 from Hubble. This is both a little bit of visible light and a good amount of the near infrared from Hubble. And you can see these bubbles created here in the structure by newborn stars and the winds and the supernova explosions that can happen in here. There's a huge cluster of stars in here. Whoops, I didn't mean to hit that. A huge cluster of stars in here called R136. That's sort of the core of the Tarantula Nebula. It has also been studied with the Spitzer Space Telescope. Now remember, this Hubble is done in visible and a good amount of near infrared. So if I go to the Spitzer Space Telescope, which is infrared, it doesn't look that different. because we have a good amount of infrared in the Hubble image. But you can see this green material here. If I blink back to the Hubble, that corresponds pretty well to the material seen in Spitzer. Of course, Hubble has a much finer resolution than Spitzer does and sees more detail. But if you want even more detail, well, the James Webb Space Telescope has looked at the Tarantula Nebula now. And it took an image in this region here of the Tarantula Nebula, a region that's centered on that star cluster called R136 that I mentioned before. And you can see just from this that that Webb is such higher. It's a quantum leap in resolution over Spitzer. And let's bring that image full screen. And you can see all of the rich detail we have here in the Tarantula Nebula from Webb. But this doesn't actually do it justice, because this image is about 1/5 or 1/6 the scale that you're seeing it on here. So let me zoom into the region around that star cluster and give you a somewhat full resolution view of it. Now, this is, of course, going to be mollified by my computer to out to the webcast onto your computer. And so you're probably not going to see all the incredible detail here, but just look at all the stars we're seeing here in R136. All right. And if we go to a region that's got nebula structure, well, that's really cool too. And you get incredible detail. So we're trying to illustrate for you the detail that Webb is able to see with a 6.5 meter mirror looking in the infrared. All right, so that's sort of to be expected. We knew Webb was going to be a quantum leap over Spitzer, but how does it compare to Hubble? Well, this is one of the few images where Hubble has a lot of infrared. So it's actually a relatively apples to apples comparison of Hubble versus Webb. All right, and so on the left is a Hubble image that I believe is from 2016, and on the right is the brand new Webb image of the Tarantula Nebula. And you can see in detail just from this large scale view that Webb has just a bit more resolution. Okay, it's about a factor of 1.5, factor of 2 resolution. That's better than Hubble. But we're going to zoom in on this lower left region here and show you a little more detail. Right? Okay, so here's the Hubble image. And I'm going to be able to blink back and forth. And here is the Webb image. Okay. And Hubble and Webb. And there you can see that there's just that much more sharpness in the Webb image than there is in the Hubble image. And also in the Hubble image, we see a lot of this dark gas down here. Okay. This dark gas that is opaque to wavelengths that Hubble observes. But when you go further into the infrared, you actually see through it and you see more detail and structure of what's happening inside these gas clouds. All right. And this kind of comparison is something that, I haven't done much. I haven't done much before. I've done it with a bunch of things, but it's hard to get, images that are reasonably well to compare. But it brings up questions in people, and people ask me, all right, well, which is better, Hubble or Webb? All right. And I usually respond to that by saying, all right, well, which is better, an SUV or a sports car? Right. Now, if you're going out to a construction site, or you want to go off-roading, or you want to, haul stuff, you want that SUV. And if you're going out onto the highway, you want to zoop around, you want to take those tight curves, well, you want that sports car. All right. The same thing is going on here. If you're looking in visible light, you want Hubble. If you're looking in infrared light, you want James Webb. All right. So it's not like one is better than the other. They're designed to do different things. Hubble is designed to look at optical light, visible light, and Webb is designed to look at infrared light. And there's a bit of an overlap, okay? And where there is an overlap, Webb, being the newer telescope, actually has better resolution. And actually, one of the main advantages of Webb is that it can get to a certain depth of an image faster. It has newer detectors. It can get to the faint stuff faster than Hubble could do on the same thing. But really, instead of choosing between a sports car and an SUV, why not both, huh? And that's what we've got here. We have a wonderful optical telescope. We have a wonderful infrared telescope, and we're sort of in like a golden age where we get to use them both together to learn more. We take images with Hubble, we take images with Webb, we compare them, we get new views, we have more understanding and more science. So these next few years, when we have both telescopes operational, are going to be wonderful, and I really look forward to the results we're going to get. All right, that's our news summary for today. Let me stop my screen share and invite Sperello to turn on his screen share. Unfortunately, Sperello, one of the reasons we started this late is that Sperello's camera is not working. His screen share is working, but not his camera. So Sperello, whenever you have it right there, he started his screen share. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, our speaker tonight, a descendant of Dante Alighieri, is Sperello di Serego Alighieri. And the most important thing about him to know is that he's not just some random descendant. He's actually an astrophysicist. He's retired, but he did work at the Astrophysical Observatory in Arcetri before he came in and did this research on his ancestor. So, ladies and gentlemen, Sperello di Serego Alighieri.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for inviting me for this conference. We are going to make a big step back in time, actually 700 years. America was not yet discovered then. Yes, I am a descendant of Dante, but you know, this is not the important thing, because I have no merit in it, and of course no guilt either. It's not an easy thing to live with, but I was helped by my father. When I was very young, starting to reading, 6 years old, he gave me a book sign which had some verses of Dante, which are the few ones that I know by heart. And they say, actually, let me make a note. I'm going to cite lots of verses of Dante. I'm going to show them to you in Italian, because this is the way Dante wrote them, but I'm going to translate them to you. So these verses, you can see it in Italian, and they say, "O little our blood nobility, you are like a mantle that soon will get shorter, so that if you don't add to it day by day, time will go around with scissors." So this means that nobility and descendants have little meaning if you don't add to it day by day. Okay, so this is what we are trying to do tonight. In fact, I've studied Dante in high school, but very little after that, until some years ago, after most of my astrophysical career had gone, that I am sharing with Dante something very important, apart from my last name, which is the passion for astronomy. Dante had this passion, there is no doubt about it. In the Convivio, which is the, if you want, the treaty, philosophical, historical, technical, scientific treaty that Dante wrote, in the beginning of the Convivio, he says that science is our the ultimate perfection of our soul, in which stays our ultimate happiness. So this is clearly the declaration of love for science. And a little later, still in the Convivio, Dante says, well, this astronomy, more than any of the other sciences, is noble and high because its subject is noble and high and deals about the movement of the sky, etc. So science is perfection of our soul and ultimate happiness. And among sciences, the highest and most noble is astronomy. There is obviously clear passion for astronomy in Dante, and he shows it throughout his works, and mostly, of course, in the Divine Comedy. In fact, the Divine Comedy is the story in poetic form of a journey throughout the whole universe, like a science fiction book. Anyway, of course, Dante was talking about astronomy as it was known at its time. At its time, it was still leading astronomy, the Ptolemaic system, done by the Greeks, and got to Dante, to Europe, back again through the Arabs, because after the burn of the library in Alexandria, most of the knowledge in the Western world was lost. But fortunately, the Arabs kept it, and then they transferred it back to Europe later. Okay, anyway, the Ptolemaic system, you know, it says that the Earth is in the middle of the world, of the universe. Earth is standing still in the middle of the universe. And then there are objects turning around it. First, the moon, Mercury, the sun is also turning around the Earth. Then Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and then the fixed stars. So that's the system at Dante's time. And of course, he's talking about this. Well, there are several ways in which Dante uses astronomy in his works. And one of them, maybe, well, one of the most important ones, is that he uses astronomy to tell about time. Timing of events is often shown with an astronomical reference. For example, here in the Inferno, he says that yesterday was full moon. Yesterday was the night in which Dante had entered Inferno, had started his trip, and so it was full moon. Well, this is not enough to tell about the timing of Dante's journey. Actually, there is something important to tell about this. Of course, Dante's journey is an imaginary one, but Dante was not a person who did things by chance. No, no, no. Even his imaginary journey had to have a place in time, very precise place in time. All readers of Dante throughout the centuries agree about this, that the journey had to have a precise timing. The problem is that the readers of Dante do not agree about what this timing should be. Of course, and so let's look at this. Here he says that it was full moon, but you know, full moon, there is one every month, and of course 12 or 13 every year, so it doesn't tell you much. Most of the readers of Dante, particularly in the old times, thought that the journey of Dante had happened in the spring of 1300. Well, spring is easy because Dante says that the sun was in Aries, so it was spring. But 1300, why 1300? Because 1300 was the first jubileum year that Pope Bonifacio VIII had declared. And there are also other historical mentions in the Divine Comedy that refer to 1300. The problem is that the astronomical references in Divine Comedy do not agree with this. In particular, this event. You know, we are at the start of the Purgatory. Dante had just come out of hell, of the earth, of inside the earth, back to see the stars, as he says. And of course, the first thing he does, he looks up and he sees, what does he see? Of course, he sees Venus, because Venus is the brightest object in the night sky, apart from the moon. And of course, if it's there, you would immediately see it. And what does he say? You can read it in Italian. It says that the planet Venus was in the east, and it was in the constellation of Pisces. Well, this is very clear, very clear. You know, Venus can be seen either in the evening, just after sunset, or in the morning before sunrise. This is because the orbit of Venus is inside the orbit of the Earth, and so you can only see Venus quite close to the sun. Now, the problem, and you know, whether you see Venus in the evening or in the morning depends on the relative position of Venus, the Earth, and the Sun, which changes, but changes, it takes many months to change. And the problem is that in the spring of 1300, Venus was seen in the evening, not in the morning. And it was not in the Pisces, it was in Taurus. So it doesn't correspond to what Dante says. The spring of 1300 is not a good date for Dante's journey, according to this astronomical reference. On the other hand, a year later, 1301, in the spring, Venus was seen in the morning, and it was in the constellation of Pisces, just like Dante says. So for us astronomers, the journey of Dante started in the night between the 24th and the 25th of March, 1301. It was full moon. Venus was seen in the morning, and it was in the Pisces. Now you can ask, what about the Jubileum? Well, the Jubileum was promoted by Pope Bonifacio VIII. And this Pope was not someone that Dante liked. But anyway, Dante was from Florence, and at the time, the calendar in Florence was such that the first day of the year was the 25th of March. So the night between the 24th and the 25th of March was still in the Jubileum year, if you really want to listen to that. Anyway, I don't want to hide the fact that in the Divine Comedy, there is a conflict between historical dating and an astronomical dating. Nobody has solved this problem, and of course, we cannot solve it now. I just want to pointed out. And of course, for us astronomers, the right dating is the astronomical one. Yeah, let's go on with other astronomical references. We are still on the first canto of the Purgatory. So just after Dante looked up and saw Venus, he says, I looked on my right and looked for the other pole, and I saw 4 stars which we had never seen before, except from the first people. Well, there are several interesting things here. You know, Dante was someone who had traveled by night several times. And at those times, of course, he didn't have any lights. There were no lights. So the only things he could use to orient himself, knowing where he was going, was look at the stars. And, you know, in the Northern Hemisphere, if you want to orient yourself, the first thing you do, you look at the northern stars, the polar star, because we have in our hemisphere, in the Northern Hemisphere, we have the chance that the axis, the rotation axis of the Earth, if you prolong it to the sky, it gets to the sky very close to a bright star, which is the polar star. And that, of course, points to the north. So now Dante has got out of the Earth on the other side. He knew that. So he knew that he could not look at the polar star, the northern polar stars. But still, he knew that the rotation axis of the Earth would get to the sky, also to the south. So he, in order to understand how he was oriented, he looks at the other pole. That's what he does. And, you know, the problem is that on the southern sky, where the rotation axis of the Earth gets to the sky, there is no bright star. They are not lucky as we are. But near there is a Southern Cross. The Southern Cross is the 4 stars. So he sees the 4 stars. Now, one could ask, how did he know about the Southern Cross? Well, that's easy. That's easy because Dante had access to star maps done by the Arabs. And the Arabs, because they knew about the Southern Cross, because you can see the Southern Cross from South Arabia, and also the Arabs were traveling around, so they knew about the Southern Cross, and they had put it in the star maps that Dante could have access to. So there is no problem that he knew about the Southern Cross. But the problem is the following verse, which says that these 4 stars had never been seen before, except to the first people. Who are these first people who saw the Southern Cross? Now, again, here there is an easy answer and a more clever one. The easy answer is, well, the first people are Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve lived in the terrestrial paradise. The terrestrial paradise is on the top of the mountain of Purgatory, and of course it is on the other side. So they would have seen the Southern Cross. But that's not a nice explanation, and it's not right. Also because Dante would have never called people 2 persons. Adam and Eve are not people, they are 2. So if he says about people, it cannot be Adam and Eve. And there is a much more interesting explanation to this, which has to do with the precession of equinoxes. Now, I suppose I don't need to explain to you what the precession of equinoxes is. Well, it's a simple fact that the rotation axis of the Earth turns around in a cycle which is about 26,000 years long, which makes that the rotation axis of the Earth points to different stars throughout the centuries. And of course, also that the stars that you can see at any latitude would change in the centuries. And in fact, if you use stellarium to see what was visible from Florence 7,000 years ago, well, you can clearly see that the Southern Cross was visible from Florence because of the precession of the equinoxes. Why did I try 7,000 years ago? Well, because at the time of Dante, it was thought that the creation of the world and soon after that, the population of the earth by the descendants of Adam and Eve happened 5,000 years before Christ, which is 7,000 years ago. So 7,000 years ago, the Southern Cross was visible at our latitudes. And the first people that Dante talks about are actually the descendants of Adam and Eve who populated our lands, the Europe and our latitudes, which is a much more satisfactory explanation. Okay. Okay, well, the question is, did Dante know about the precession of the equinoxes? Of course he did. In fact, in the Convivio, again, he says that there is this movement, very slow movement, which goes from west to east by a degree every 100 years. A degree every 100 years means that to do a full turn, 360 degrees, it would take 36,000 years. Now, 36,000 years is a bit longer than the 26,000 years that we know is the period of the precession of the equinoxes, but that doesn't matter. Okay, the precession of the equinoxes, the period was overestimated by some amount, but that's not the problem. He knew about it, and he could tell that the Southern Cross could be visible by Florence long ago. Okay. Now we go to another part of the Divine Comedy. It's the 26th canto of the Inferno. And there is Ulysses who, well, actually Dante and Virgilio encounter Ulysses. And Ulysses tells Dante about his last trip. Ulysses did a last trip when he was already old, with his friends who were also old, and what they did, they went to Gibraltar. Gibraltar was thought at the time of Dante to be the extreme west of the world, and it was something that you could not go farther because the rest was completely unknown. But in fact, Ulysses, he wanted to discover what was after that. So what he did, you see, he crossed Gibraltar, and of course, when doing that, he would leave Sevilla, so Spain, to his right, and to his left, he would leave Ceuta, which is in Morocco. Okay, well, this shows actually what is the geography at Dante's time. You see, these are the emergent lands that were to exist at Dante's time. They are all in the northern hemisphere, and not by chance, Jerusalem is at the center of them. If you go 90 degrees to the west of Jerusalem, you get to Gibraltar. If you go 90 degrees to the east, you get to the exit of Gange, the Gange River, which was thought to be the extreme east. And then to the north, to the northern Europe, and to the south, to Equatorial Africa. So that were the emergent lands. So Ulysses crosses Gibraltar, and of course, what they did was, of course, they had the back of their ship in the east, and so they were going west, but they would go left from the west, so south, and then of course going south, at some point they crossed the equator, and they say that they would see all the stars from the southern hemisphere, and our pole was so low that it went below the horizon. You know, when you cross the equator, the northern star doesn't get out of the sea. So they were going south. This is another way to see it. So they crossed Gibraltar, they were going south, crossing the equator, and they were going on. And at some point, they reached this mountain of Purgatory, which is the opposite of Jerusalem, you see. And of course, seeing this land after 5 months of traveling in sea, of course, they were happy. But soon, they were not happy anymore, because from the new Earth, it started a storm, which got to his boat and make the boat turn 3 times, and at the 4th times the boat went down, and it sank, and they all died. Well, so what I want to point to you is just actually one important thing, which actually the most important thing, which I'm going to tell you, which I forgot to tell you at the beginning. Dante, as a medieval man and as a genius, how he was, he could contain into his mind all the knowledge available at its time, and all well. This is something that for us, it is hard to understand, because we've lost this capability. We've lost this capability not only because we are not genius as Dante was, but also because the knowledge in all fields has, of course, grown very much in all these centuries, so that one single mind cannot contain all of them. But Dante could do it. For us, it's not easy to understand, but there are several effects from this fact. One important one is that in order to understand Dante, one person is not enough, because we, at our time, we people who deal with knowledge, if we want to say something new in the field of knowledge, we have to specialize. There's no way out of this. So we are all specialized. We know well one thing, but the other things we don't know well, we cannot know well. So in order to explain Dante, you cannot listen to just one person. You have to listen to several persons. Don't trust somebody who tells you, I know everything about Dante. That's not possible. So the other fact is that I'm going to talk to you about astronomy in Dante. And I don't want to say that this is all. Actually, I invite you to listen to other people for the other aspects of Dante. Anyway, so now I've talked to you about the Ulysses story in Dante, just to show you about the geography. But of course, in Ulysses stories in Dante, there is much more, but you have to listen to other people to know that. Okay, let's go on. Yeah, the passage at the center of the earth. You know, Dante and Virgilio get down into hell until they reach the center of the earth. At the center of the earth, there is Lucifer, the devil, who is stuck there, just at the center. And so they go down Lucifer's body until they reach the center of the earth. And at the time of Dante, it was thought that gravity was a property of the center of the earth. Every body is attracted by the center of the earth. So what happens at the center of the earth is that gravity turns over. So when they go along the body of Lucifer, at some point, gravity turns over, and so what they do is they were going down, and at some point they're starting to go up. So that Dante, in the beginning, he thinks, well, are we going back into hell? No, they are not. They're going to the other side. Of course, we all know that this is not true, and I don't need to explain this to you. Okay, well, this we have already said. Well, that's another aspect I want to tell you about astronomy in Dante. You know, the Milky Way. Dante talks several times about the Milky Way in the Hell, and in the Hell he refers to the Greek mythological story about the origin of the Milky Way, and the Greek mythological story is that Phaetonte, who was the son of Apollo, the god of the sun, and Phaetonte had taken the chariot of his father. The chariot was taking the sun around, and since he took this chariot, you know, as a son stealing the cow of his father, and since he did not know how to drive it, he went around the sky in a funny way, and that trip left this bright strip across the sky, which is the Milky Way. So that's the mythological story, and Dante refers to it in the Hell. Actually, not just one time, a couple of times. But then in the Paradise, he talks again about the Milky Way, and he says, you see here, that the Milky Way is made of minor and major lights, which is stars. So this is our view. And actually in the Convivio, he's much more precise about this. And he says that the galaxy is nothing else than a multitude of fixed stars that in that part are so small that we cannot distinguish them, but we see them as that bright strip that we call galaxy. So this is very clear. So Dante knew that the galaxy was made of stars, but he was, as a medieval man, he was in the middle between the old mythological stories and the new, if you want, explanations. Oops. Well, this is an image of the Milky Way as we know it. I don't need to tell you about the Milky Way. This is an external galaxy which looks very similar to what the Milky Way would look like if we could be able to see it from outside. Okay, this is the one but last theme that I will tell you about tonight. We are dealing about errors. We're dealing about mistakes. Now, of course, you know very well that mistakes are not a problem for us scientists. Actually, we know that in many cases, science progresses because we recognize that we've made some mistakes and we try to correct them. And by doing this, the science goes on. Of course, this way to deal with mistakes is not the same for everybody, as we unfortunately know, but that's something else. Okay. We are in the second canto of the Paradise. Dante had to leave his leader, Virgilio, who led him through hell and to Inferno and Purgatory, because Virgilio could not go beyond Purgatory, because he was not baptized. And so Dante had to find a new leader, and he finds Beatrice. Of course, this is not by chance. And, you know, starting his trip with Beatrice, the first body, the first sky they get to is the sky of the moon. And, well, you know, the moon had a big problem. You know, the moon is the only night sky body that you can distinguish, I mean, that you can resolve by naked eye. And of course, Dante only had naked eye. There were no instruments except from the eye. All the other bodies in the sky, you know, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, they were all points. The only thing that Dante's eye could resolve in the night sky is the moon. But the moon had a problem. The moon had spots. Well, how comes that? They all told us that the sky is perfect. You know, circles, spheres. But the moon has spots. But this is not perfect. So how comes that? And of course, Dante, well, takes the opportunity that he has Beatrice. And so he asks him about the origin of moon spots. And you can see here, he asked Beatrice, please tell me, what are these dark spots on this body that people down on the earth think they are like the face of Caino? Well, the fact that at the time they thought that the moon spot represent the face of Caino. Well, you can see on the moon spots whatever you like. But so that was the question. And so it goes on here, and it says, Ella, so Beatrice, smiles a bit. Now, be careful. When Beatrice smiles, there's something important happening. And then Beatrice goes on, well, Beatrice tries to answer, and the first thing she says is, well, be careful. the first thing that comes to your mind is not necessarily the right one. And then Beatrice does something that we are all very much used to it, because we've all been pupil, and some of us have been teacher. You know, when a student asks his teacher a question, well, often the teacher reverses the question to the student. And so this is what Beatrice does. Ma dimmi quel che tu da te ne pensi. Please tell me what you think about it. So Beatrice reverses the question to Dante. And Dante, he has to say something. And Dante says, well, I think that what the spots are the fact that there are different densities inside the moon, corpi rari e densi. Well, this idea is an old idea. So Dante refers to an idea of Averroes, which was accepted by Albert the Great, and he also talks about it in the Convivio. You see, this rarità means little density, which is causing the spots in the moon. Well, and then here starts the answer of Beatrice. And Beatrice starts by saying, well, you're wrong. You're wrong. Listen to me. Listen to what I'm telling you. So this is about errors. The first thing Beatrice does to refute Dante's idea is this. She refers to the eighth sphere. The eighth sphere is the sphere of the fixed stars. In fact, she said that the eighth sphere shows you many lights, many stars. And in fact, she says, well, you know, the different stars in the eighth sphere have different brightness. Now, if the different brightness of the stars were due to a different density, as you say for the moonspots, then the stars would have only one quality, one virtue, which is density. And this cannot be, because every star has its own virtue, which is transferred from God to humans. Well, of course, this is an argument which is theological, philosophical, but this is the first argument that Beatrice uses. But then she goes on, and I invite you to read this whole canto because it's very interesting. And Beatrice then says the following thing. Well, if there are dense regions and less dense regions in the moon, and these are causing the moonspots, then there can only be two cases. Either the dense regions do not cover the whole face of the moon, or they cover it. Well, that's quite obvious. And then she said, well, the first case, that the dense regions do not cover the whole face of the moon, is not possible, because during an eclipse, a solar eclipse, you know, in which the moon gets in front of the sun, you would see the light of the sun going through these less dense regions of the moon that do not cover the whole face. So it is not possible that the less dense the dense region do not cover the whole face of the moon. The dense region must cover the whole face of the moon. That's clear. But then Beatrice says, well, you could think that still the moonspots are caused by the fact that the the dense regions are at different depths inside the moon, and that could cause the moonspots. In order to refute even this other hypothesis, so completely get rid of Dante's idea, Beatrice does a thought experiment, a Gedankene experiment. You know, Einstein did the same centuries later in order to explain his theories. So the thought experiment that Beatrice is talking about is the following. Tre specchi prenderai. Take 3 mirrors. You place 2 of those mirrors in front of you at some distance. And the third one, you place it farther between the first 2. So at a larger distance between the first 2. And then you put a light on your back, like a fire, a light, something, so that you can see reflected in all 3 mirrors. And then in the end, you see, in the end here, she says, well, although the image which you see reflected in the farther mirror is smaller in size than those that you see reflected into the other 2, still you will see it shine in the same way, come convien ch'igualmente risplenda. So this is, for us astronomers, is a very clear thing. It's the fact that the surface brightness of an object in the sky does not depend on its distance. It's very clear. The surface brightness is the ratio between the luminosity or the total luminosity of the object and the solid angles obtained by the object. And since it's the ratio between these 2 things, and since both things vary inversely as a square root of the distance, their ratio is constant with the distance. We all know this very well. Well, there is something really wonderful happening here. Something really wonderful. First, Dante chooses as his scientific master a woman, Beatrice. It will take many centuries before a woman will be accepted in science. You know, maybe Marie Curie, well, you tell me. Well, Dante had already done it. Second thing, Beatrice, but it's Dante who writes, of course, uses a Gedanken experiment in order to confute an idea. Einstein did the same many centuries later. And third, Beatrice, but it still is Dante who writes, talks about the constants of surface brightness with distance. Well, I think we can give Dante a PhD in physics. Well, if not a Nobel Prize. Anyway. Well, this is an image of the thought experiments. You see the observer, the 3 mirrors, and the lamp in the back. Well, the light in the back. Okay, let's get on to my last argument for tonight. It's about the whole structure of the universe, of Dante's universe. Well, we know the structure of Dante's universe starts from the Ptolemaic system. We already said that. The Earth is at the center of the universe, and then there are 9 spheres above the Earth. The Moon, Mercury, Venus, the Sun, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, the fixed stars, and the primo mobile, the prime mover, which is, all these spheres around the Earth are turning faster and faster. And the primo mobile is the fastest turning one. And in fact, it was called prime mover because it was thought that it would give the movement to all the others. Then at the end of the 27th canto of the Paradise, Dante and Beatrice get to this primo mobile, to this prime mover, and they look on the other side and they see something symmetric. Another 9 spheres, the angelic circles are actually spheres, and at the center of one inside the other, and at the center of them, there is a very bright spot of light, which is God. Well, this structure had made scientists think that this structure is very similar to Einstein's hypersphere. The Einstein hypersphere is the way that the universe is structured in Einstein's idea. The first person to think about this was a Swiss guy, mathematician, a physicist mathematician, Andreas Speiser. In 1925, he wrote about this, about the similarity of the structure of Dante's universe with Einstein hypersphere. Not many years after Einstein's general relativity. But there is a very beautiful article, which I recommend you to read, by Mark Peterson, an American mathematician and physicist. This article is in the American Journal of Physics, and it was published in 1979. And this figure actually comes from that article. You see, this is the Ptolemaic universe with the Earth at the center and the 9 spheres around it. And here is a symmetric thing which is beyond the prime mover. You see, it's very symmetric. Actually, this point P is the point where Dante and Beatrice get to the primo mobile. And at the end of the 27th canto of the Paradise, Dante says about this point, he says, I cannot tell you which place Beatrice chose for us, for this point. So it doesn't matter where they got to the primo mobile. What they would see on the other side would always be the same. Now, you see the question on the top. How could Dante think of an hypersphere? This is a question that we would like to understand. I think it's the important question. How could he think something that is similar to an hypersphere? And I think that the answer to this deals with the fact that spherical geometry at the times of Dante was very well known, was even maybe better known than Euclidean geometry. Euclidean geometry deals about parallels, deals with square angles, deals with Pythagoras theorem, and so on. Spherical geometry is completely different. Spherical geometry, for example, is the geometry on the surface of a sphere. Now, on the surface of a sphere, you don't have parallels. There are no parallels. Full circles always have 2 points in common. So there are no parallels. The Pythagorean theorem does not hold on the surface of the sphere. So it's a completely different geometry. And it was well known at the time of Dante because they knew that sphere is where we live, is where we travel, is where we build. So it was important because of this. More so also, Dante had as a master Brunetto Latini. Brunetto Latini was a teacher of Dante, and he had written a book, the Treasure. This book had been written both in Italian and in Old French, and it's a sort of an encyclopedic book. It deals with many different things, and it also deals with spherical geometry. Now, how does he deal with it? He deals with it not by looking at a sphere from outside, but by being on a sphere, which is what we do every day. And he says, well, take two riders on a horse, starting from the same point of a spherical or a surface of a sphere, say the Earth, and they start from the same point into different directions. So what happens is that they travel, forget about mountains and seas, doesn't matter. They travel, and then they meet again on the opposite side of the Earth. If they travel further, they would meet again at the starting point. So this is something very simple that Dante could very well understand. Brunetto Latini had explained this to Dante. It's very easy to understand. Now, let's take this other example. Let's take two riders, two men, two ants, whatever you like, leaving from the South Pole of the Earth, from the South Pole. Well, whichever direction he leaves, he would go north. He can only go north. And what happens when he goes north? He would cross circles of increasing size, parallels of increasing size, until he reaches the largest one, which is the equator. Now, if you put a parallel every 10 degrees from the South Pole to the equator, you would cross 9 parallels, just like the 9 skies that Dante crossed to reach the prima mobile. Going further from the equator, the traveler would cross circles of decreasing size until he gets to one point, the North Pole. So, what I'm telling you is very easy, very simple. Dante could very well understand this, no problem. So, what Dante has done to think about the structure of his universe, he has used the same example, the same thing, by increasing it by 1 dimension. So, he starts from the Earth, crosses not 9 circles, 9 spheres, because there is 1 additional dimension, until the largest one, the prima mobile. And after that, there are other 9 spheres, smaller, one inside the other, until a point, luminous point, which is God. So, you see, the way I'm telling you this is quite clear that Dante could do it, and he has done it. This is what Dante has done. Of course, he could not know, and he did not know, that this would become Einstein's hypersphere. No, he didn't know that. He doesn't tell it. Of course, only many centuries later we could guess about the similarities, but that's not important. But Dante could do it, and he has done it. Okay. Well, some details. The article by Mark Peterson about the similarity of Einstein, Dante universe structure and Einstein hypersphere, well, starts by saying poetry and physics are similar endeavors. Of course, then there is the equation of the hypersphere, well known. The hypersphere is a three-dimensional sphere in a four-dimensional space, and the equation is like this. It's like the equation of a sphere with an additional item. There is a fourth dimension. In Dante's case, the fourth dimension is rotation velocity. Of course, in Einstein's, this is time. Multiplied by the velocity of light is also a dimension. So this is what, but of course Dante could not know about this. He does not talk about time, but he has a fourth dimension, which is rotation velocity. In fact, the Earth is standing still. All the 9 Ptolemaic skies above it, they turn around it faster and faster. And the angelic circles, the angelic spheres, they keep turning faster and faster. So the rotation velocity is a coordinate which increases from the Earth to God uniformly. So that's Dante's fourth dimension. Well, let's skip this. If you want, you can read it in Mark Peterson paper. Yeah, I want to end this by telling you a few things. Well, the structure of Dante's universe solves quite a few problems that were quite severe at the time. Well, one of these problems was the fact that the Ptolemaic universe had the Earth at the center of the universe. And you know, at the center of the Earth, you have Lucifer. So having a universe which has at the center Lucifer is not something that they liked. In Dante's structure, at least, well, the universe has two centers. On one side, there's the Earth with Lucifer, but at the other side, there is a bright spot, which is God. So that was a problem, an important problem solved by Dante's universe structure. The other thing, you know, people at the time were asking questions, well, like, well, is God inside or outside the universe? And if God is inside the universe, what is outside the universe? You know, these are quite important questions. Well, Dante has solved it because clearly God is inside the universe. Dante sees it, he gets there. So God is inside the universe. And what is outside? Well, there is nothing outside the universe. Well, I can explain this to you. Well, I try to do it in two ways. Well, first, let's get one dimension back. Think that we are two-dimensional beings living in a two-dimensional world. And our two-dimensional world is the surface of a sphere. Now, our world is clearly unlimited because we can travel through it without finding any limit. We can go on traveling and there is no limit. But it's finite because the surface of a sphere has a certain finite surface. So unlimited and finite. And what's outside it? There's nothing because we are two-dimensional. This is our two-dimensional world, and outside there's nothing. You know, our view of the universe is that our universe started in in a singularity, which happened 13.6 billion years ago. Some people call it Big Bang, but it's not a bang, it's not an explosion, it's a singularity. Space and time started at that point and at that time. And then the universe expanded and, you know, you get stars, galaxies, etc., and human beings. And what's outside? There's nothing. I mean, if you think the highest velocity is the speed of light. So if you take a sphere, which is 13.6 billion light years large as a radius, well, there can be nothing outside that. Okay. I think I'll end here just by telling you that the astronomical arguments that I have told you in Dante's Divine Comedy are only a few of them. About 1.5 years ago, I wrote a book with Massimo Capaccioli about trying to deal about all these arguments. It's in Italian. But then we wrote an English version of the book, which you can see here, edited by Word Scientific. And so if you are interested in knowing about the other astronomical arguments in the Divine Comedy, you can read them here. And I want to end by the last verse of the Divine Comedy, L'amor che muove il sole e le altre stelle. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sperello. That was, for someone who has not gone into the Divine Comedy as deeply, quite enlightening from I don't know, the journey that starts out as going, I don't know, kind of like Jules Verne, Journey to the Center of the Earth, but then transforms into a journey across the universe and such. That you know, certainly opened my eyes to what we're seeing here.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. I don't know if you foresee that there could be questions or.
We expect there will be questions. I always ask the first question.
Please.
And so my first question has to deal with, yeah, actually the variety of the things that I sort of sparked on in terms of things, because you talk about, this is a 12th century book, but he's talking about, you're mentioning the Earth as a sphere and sort of accepting the idea that the Earth is a sphere when, you know, in history, we sort of think of that as being something that happened much later during the Renaissance. So it sort of has allegories to, as I said, Jules Verne earlier, but also to Galileo in touch. And when you think of it, when you mention him as a genius, it really, the parallels across history were extremely strong to me. And I was just wondering what your thoughts are on that.
Well, the fact that the Earth is a sphere actually was known by the Greeks. I think I may be wrong, but it was maybe Parcos or a Greek guy who actually measured the radius of the Earth by noticing that in the same day, like the summer equinox, the sun would get to the bottom of a well in Aswan in the southern Egypt, and would actually not be vertical in the northern part of Egypt or in Greece, and by the difference in angle of the sun to the surface of the Earth, and the distance of the 2 points, he could measure the radius of the Earth quite accurately, actually. So it was well known that the Earth was round. What
but
was
as you say,
not
you know,
known,
a lot of that knowledge was lost
well,
into the Middle Ages. So
no. Well, yeah. Some of that knowledge was lost, definitely when the Library of Alexandria burned and after that. But it went back to Europe through the Arabs, but I'm sure that actually the knowledge of the Earth being round was never really lost, even in the West. What they didn't know, and what Galileo and others, Kepler, dealt with was the fact that the Earth is not at the center of the universe. There was the sun. So that's another argument, and the sphericity of the Earth was known.
right. Well, also the variations on the moon is striking with the Galileo observations that of the lunar mare and the variations on the moon. That was another one of the parallels that I had seen on this. Let's see. Grant has been monitoring the chat more closely than I have. Can we, Grant, do you want to turn on your video and see if we have any questions from our YouTube chat?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got one to start us off, which I like, which is, especially in the time of Dante, there are a lot of things that he was thinking about. Frank kind of mentioned that we kind of take for granted. What kind of technology would he have had to have these sort of observations or these like grand ideas?
Well, very little technology would be none, in the sense that in terms of aids to the eye, there was none. So they would look at the stars, at the planets, the sky by the naked eye. There was no way out of that. It would take only a few centuries, 3-4 centuries before Galileo in 1609 first pointed a telescope to the sky. So 1609 was much later. And as you know, as soon as Galileo did look at the sky, not by the naked eye, but with some instrument, he made incredible discoveries, like the mountains of the moon, like the satellites of Jupiter, the faces of Venus, and so on. And they were published in the Sidereus Nuncius in just a year later, in 1610. But that was long after Dante.
Sperello, would you mind stopping your screen share real quick so that the audience can see all of us?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Awesome.
So do you have another question there, Grant? Or I can try and mine through my things that I've got. I've got so many notes. In particular, the relevance of the Aristotelian view of the universe as perfect spheres and such, and the sort of parallels to the 9 spheres and then the 9 other spheres that you mentioned for Dante's universe. How much? I mean, what sort of correlation is there between the Aristotelian view and Dante's presentation?
Well, Dante definitely had a very big admiration for Aristotle, but mostly as a philosopher. Also, in a sense, the view of the universe, but Aristotle did not have his own view of the universe. He was helped by astronomers, I mean, by Hipparchus, Ptolemy. So these were the astronomers who actually had built the view of the universe at Dante's time. Aristotle did not do that. But still, Dante was a great admirer because of his philosophy and his logic, and yeah.
Yeah, and you were spot on when you mentioned how back in those days, being a philosopher meant you could study all different types of sciences that we consider totally disparate today. And I absolutely agree with you. I'm totally jealous of folks who lived in that time for at least that aspect, being able to be an expert in many different sciences, which is totally impossible today.
It is. It is. In fact, let me tell you a little story about this. You know, in 2021 was the 700th anniversary of Dante's death. So there were big celebrations in Italy and also elsewhere in the world. And because of that, I gave several conferences about Dante's cosmography. And in one of them, after I'd finished my talk, somebody came to me and he said, well, I am a teacher in high school and I teach Dante. You know, in Italy, Dante is taught in high school in the last 3 years. And in each one of the last 3 years, one reads at high school Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradise. And so I read this all to my students. But when I get to the second canto of Paradise, I skip it because I don't know how to explain it. You know, the second canto of Paradise, the one I talked about, it's about the moon spots. And of course, somebody who does not know about the fact that the surface brightness does not depend on distance, how can he explain the canto? So he told me, I can, and you see, this reinforces my idea that you cannot just listen to one person if you want to understand Dante. You have to listen to several ones.
Yes, it sounds like a many-faceted presentation. I think I saw another question in the chat there, Grant. Did you?
Yeah, absolutely. Does Dante try to tell us how the Earth shifted? This person makes reference to the circles and stones for calculating positions after the 13,000-year disaster.
Oh, I'm sorry, I do not understand this question.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what this question was referring to either with the 13,000-year disaster, what that meant.
Okay.
13,000 years is just half of the period of the precession of the equinoxes, but this is the only thing I can say.
It's okay. Did Dante use Virgil and Homer to help him write his poem like Milton?
That's an interesting question. Well, definitely, yes, but there are interesting things to say about this. Of course, Virgil was very much loved by Dante and admired by Dante, and this is demonstrated definitely by the fact that Virgil is Dante's leader throughout hell and paradise. You know, this is it means that he was very important for Dante. But about Homer, it's different. Well, first of all, Dante could not read Greek, ancient Greek. He could not read it. So he had heard about Homer, definitely, but probably only through translations in Latin. And in fact, it's very interesting that when he talks about Ulysses, who's of course the main person in Homer's Odyssea, well, he does not refer to what Homer wrote, but he tells a new story, a completely new story, which is the story of the last journey of Ulysses trying to discover the earth outside the Gibraltar, outside the limits made by Hercules. So yeah, it's hard to actually. I've read something about this. People do not really know how much Dante knew about Homer's works. He probably had heard about it, but maybe he did not know a lot.
Gotcha. All right.
Okay.
So we have another good one.
Okay. This will be the last one because we're getting to time.
Sure. Okay. Did Dante travel to other regions, or did he spend most of his time in Florence?
No. Dante was exiled from Florence in 1301, and when he was 35 years old, and it's not by chance that actually the Divine's Comedy trip is imagined to be right on that year, 1301. But then, since he was exiled, he could not go back to Florence, although he wanted to. So he traveled around Italy in many different places. He spent a lot of time in Verona. Verona is a town in the northeast of Italy, and that town was ruled by a family called Della Scala, and he spent quite a lot of time there. Actually, his son Pietro also lived there, and his son in 1353, actually the 28th of April of 1353, bought a land near Verona, in a region where they make good wine, Valpolicella, near Verona. And that piece of land is still owned by my family. Then Dante lived also quite a few years in Ravenna, near the Adriatic coast, where he actually died, and he is buried there. So he traveled around Italy quite a lot. But although if you go around Italy, in many towns, you see stones which says, yeah, Dante has been here. Yeah. Well, be careful, because actually the presence of Dante is documented by documents of the time only in Florence, Verona, Ravenna, and there is another town which is called Sarzana. Sarzana is a town in the north of Tuscany, near Liguria, near La Spezia. So, Dante has been there because there is a document made by a lawyer, a document of the time, which says that Dante was there, and he actually had testified for some reasons there. So be careful. People tell, Dante's been here, Dante's been here. Yeah, but this is not documented. Anyway.
Yeah, sort of in the US, we have the George Washington slept here type thing, where people always claiming that, famous people had come through there. All right, well, thank you so much. This really transforms the story, or gives a totally new aspect to the story for this. I will say that next month is November 1st. Black holes, how do we see that which gives off no light? We hope to see all of you there. Thank you very much again, Sperello, and we will see you, everybody, next month.
Thank you. Bye-bye.